2014 poll found that 13% of Americans were still holding a grudge against England for opposing our independence in 1776. 13%. To put that in perspective, 13% of Americans in 2014 is 41,340,000 people. Still mad at England. A friend told me this story about her Aunt Jeanette. She said, "I love my Aunt Jeanette. She used to take me and my siblings to Kittyland on North Avenue in Chicago. She would be there waving at us as our rides went around and around. Aunt Jeanette was fun. And Aunt Jeanette told the best stories. But as I got older, I noticed that there was an odd tone to a couple of her stories, especially about her sister Tanya, who lived in Greece. Somehow when Aunt Jeanette talked about Tanya, her facial features changed. Once she told us about a pair of white shoes that she desperately wanted when she was a little girl and just needed $1 to buy them. And she asked her sister Tanya, "But did she give me the dollar?" "No, she wouldn't do it," Aunt Jeanette complained with her face pinched. As an adult, hearing the story of the dollar, my friend asked, "Will you ever forgive her for that?" "Forgive her?" she said loudly. "Never." And there was that look again, that bitter look. As far as I could tell, Aunt Jeanette carried that story to her grave. $1. Just $1. It might be easy to giggle and laugh at how silly the story of Aunt Jeanette is, or the poll of our fellow country folks. A lifelong grudge over $1, something that happened hundreds of years ago. But then we realize that most of us have our own Aunt Jeanette stories, something similar. Perhaps something smaller like a single dollar for a pair of shoes 40 years ago, or perhaps a bigger betrayal, loss of trust, of faith, something that forced you to change direction, become a little more guarded, something that just plain hurt. And when you are reminded of that moment or that person, you're transported right back, however long ago. The pain's still fresh. Simply defined, a grudge is a negative feeling towards someone because of something they did or are perceived to have done in the past. Grudges are real and messy. The language we use around grudges highlights their longevity. We talk of holding, of bearing, of harboring, of nursing grudges. Common synonyms such as resentment and bitterness, grievance and malice indicate other feelings and emotions that might be present to varying degrees. And it isn't just emotional, as our language suggests, it can be very physical, a weight. All that holding and bearing and harboring and nursing can have real physical consequences, not just psychological ones. And it seems against our own self-interest to hold on to these past wrongs, to remain seething, unable to move forward. Holding a grudge can be part of our identity, how we recognize ourselves, perhaps even what motivates us or creates purpose, sometimes for vengeance or revenge, which of course is the first cousin of a grudge. And this is no modern concept, for we are actually prohibited from bearing grudges in our book of Leviticus. During our Torah service this afternoon, we will read this verse, chapter 19. Lo tikom velo titor et b'nei amecha. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the members of your people. Rabbi Joshua Samuels teaches there are multiple Hebrew words for grudge. The first is satam, which can also mean to hate or cherish animosity. We see this word used in Genesis 27. Esau bore a grudge against Jacob, or in the story of Joseph and his brothers in Genesis 50, Joseph's brothers said, "It may be that Joseph bears a grudge against us and will fully reciprocate all the evil which we did to him." The other Hebrew word that translates to grudge is from the root natar, which means to keep, to guard, to retain. This is the root used in our Leviticus verse, lo titor, do not bear a grudge. Literally, when one holds a grudge, one is keeping alive the memory of another's offense, guarding it, retaining it. Our wise sage Rashi explains that bearing a grudge in this verse with an example. Here's his example. If Paula says to her neighbor Joel, "Lend me your lawnmower," and he replies, "No." And on the next day, Joel comes to Paula and says, "Lend me your watering can." And she replies, "Here it is. I am not like you, because I gave you the watering can, even though you would not lend me the lawnmower." It's a bit of an update to Rashi, I'll admit. But the point remains the same. Rashi calls this bearing a grudge because Paula retained the hostility, the anger in her heart, even when she ended up not giving Joel a taste of his own medicine and offering the watering can. The results seem fair and measured, not vengeful, but the intention isn't there. The anger in her heart is the motivator, rather than the desire to be helpful, neighborly, be a mensch. The rabbis, of course, hotly debate grudges, attempting to ascertain what is considered a grudge and thereby forbidden in Leviticus 19 and what is not. If someone insults me personally, can I hate them just a little? For how long? Can I choose not to help them or help them begrudgingly? What if they never apologize? How long can I be angry if every Yom Kippur I wait for the apology call that never comes? The difference between vengeance and bearing a grudge, as understood by the rabbis, is clear. Vengeance is acting in a retaliatory fashion. I won't lend you something because you wouldn't lend something to me. And bearing a grudge is a verbal withholding. I'll lend it to you, but I won't like it, and I'll tell you why. Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, commonly known as the Chofetz Chaim, a 19th century rabbi and ethicist, came to this conclusion after going through the pages and pages of rabbinic grudge-related what-ifs. He wrote, "Enough already. One must wipe the thing from one's heart." But how? Maimonides suggests, when one person sins against another, the victim should not harbor hatred and remain silent. Rather, it is incumbent upon them to speak and say, "Why have you done such and such?" And if the aggressor repents and asks for forgiveness, the victim must forgive. The forgiver must not be cruel. One must wipe the thing from one's heart. And here we are on the holiest day of our year, Yom Kippur, the day of repentance, atonement, of turning away from sin, away from bad choices, and ultimately a day of forgiveness. Are we ready? Atonement in Jewish tradition requires accountability. Our tradition teaches that we are obligated to forgive the perpetrator who has apologized and started the hard work of change. But when those two elements are not present, we have no obligation to forgive. But we can choose to. Through our own hard work, our own internal struggle and persistence, through the sheer force of will and intention, through our own tshuva, turning and returning, can we choose to let go? There's an old Buddhist story of two monks traveling together. At one point, they come to a river with a strong current. As the monks are preparing to cross the river, they see a woman also attempting to cross. She asks if they can help her. The two monks glanced at one another because they had taken vows never to touch a woman. Then, without a word, the older monk picked up the woman, carried her across the river, placed her gently on the other side, continued on his journey. 2 more hours passed, then 3, and finally the younger monk could not contain himself anymore, and he blurted out, "As monks, we are not permitted to touch a woman. How could you then carry her on your shoulders?" The older monk looked at him and replied, "Brother, I set her down on the other side of the river hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" I know it's easier said than done, I know. But can we try? Carrie Fisher, of blessed memory, apparently used to say, "Holding a grudge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die." Researchers have actually measured brain waves as well as blood pressure to determine how holding onto anger can cause us physical harm. A study performed at Oxford University has stated that holding a grudge has been associated with heightened cardiovascular disease, risky high blood pressure. Similarly, a study was done in the Journal of Behavioral Medicine, which stated that holding a grudge can negatively affect your sleeping. It was stated that being hostile would decrease your ability to have a good night's sleep, which of course has proven to be detrimental as you go about your day. The implications of holding a grudge can also manifest themselves in our mental health. We are likely to get so caught up in a situation that we don't see a way out of it, and the only response that makes sense is keeping angry. The thing about not getting over a wrongdoing is that feeling of anger and bitterness and resentment can begin to show themselves in our other relationships. These negative feelings rob us of the ability to enjoy our lives, our relationships, our friends, our families, the things we love the most, prevent us from replacing negative thoughts with positive ones. We lose so much when we hold and harbor, when we nurse and bear. We lose bits of ourselves, our joy, our humanity, our connection with something greater than we are. Enough loss, enough anger, let us return. Let us return to Leviticus 19. Lo tikom velo titor et bnei amecha, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against members of your people, but the verse continues. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ani Adonai. Love your fellow as yourself. I am Adonai. Maybe our path toward forgiveness, toward letting go, our path home to ourselves was there all along. Love your fellow as yourself. When we see the humanity in another, when we give the benefit of the doubt, when we offer forgiveness and cultivate joy, when we let go, we love. We love our fellow and we love ourselves. Psychologist Nancy Collier states, "Our heart contains both our pain and the elixir from our pain. When we move our attention inside into our hearts, our pain can shift. In refocusing our attention, we find the soothing kindness and compassion that the grudge itself desires. We then can let go of the identity of the one who was wronged because it no longer serves us. Without that need for our grudge, it often simply drops away. What becomes clear is that we are where we need to be, in our own heart's company. May we love ourselves and each other and the other. May we love enough to seek happiness. May we love enough to forgive and let go. May we love." Rabbi Nachman taught, "Always look for the good in yourself and remember, Joy is not incidental to your spiritual quest. It is vital. Gemar Chatima Tova.